2, 1, 2, 3, and. And now we will have our final original spoken word by Anissa. It's right before. Do you need the mic?
No. Okay. I'll talk from here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. My name's Anissa. When you look into a person's eyes, what do you see? Can you see tears about to form like rain clouds before a dangerous thunderstorm? Can you see their memories and their history, or do their misty eyes carry some sort of mystery? Do their eyes shine bright like the brightest of lights? Do you see stars in the sky or the luminous moon, as if a blink of an eye would start a great typhoon? Do you see specks of color in their eyes? Specks of green, blue, or brown? Do you see special patterns inside, like in a lyric, in a sound? Do the sounds that you hear and the patterns and the colors make all noises fall silent and all colors turn duller? But there'd be no need for music or for the moon in the sky, because all the sounds I can hear and all the lights I can see can't compare to the ones that are there in your eyes. When you look into a person's eyes, what do you see? Well, when I look into yours, I see you looking at me.
Before we conclude our STEAM presentation, and you are all, by the way, participating in our final song, please take a look at the art that's on the walls. It's right behind you on the sides here, and there's actually some in the hallway right over here. The students do incredible work. I'm always in awe of what Amy, who blankly is very shy, taking pictures right now in the middle school, does, and what Claudine does in the high school. So they do awesome things. So congratulations, good job on them. And our last, yes. Oh. So, on the back of your program are the words to "We Shall Overcome." We are not going to sing all 7 verses. What I did was I bolded and asterisked 3 of them. So we'll start, well, the band will play a slight introduction, and I will help, and I will conduct, and we will all sing "We Shall Overcome" to close out our STEAM celebration of Black History Month. was enjoyable and educational. I know I learned a couple of things. We would like to, however, gentlemen, if you want to come up for a second, anybody who has questions, especially you guys, because, you know, they're only slightly ahead of you, some of you anyway. You know,
Please, any questions? Oh, what'd you say? No questions.
no questions?
Well, I have one thinking of.
Oh, you have one? All right, Kadir?
Do you know Miss Karras? Yeah, I think like she did something. She said to her.
Sikorsky's a big place.
Yeah,
There is one junior thinking of going into manufacturing engineering.
Oh, wow.
Any helpful hints or suggestions?
You wanted to know if they just knew somebody who worked at Sikorsky. It's a big place. So, all right, so
Hold on, I think, what was that you said, ma'am?
There's one junior, high school junior, thinking of going into manufacturing engineering.
Great, that's a beautiful thought, yes.
Any helpful hints, suggestions?
Well, conceptually, manufacturing, everything is manufactured. So you're looking from a job perspective, everything has to get manufactured, and you're an engineer. So if you're looking for a job market, that's probably a good one to go into. You touch every aspect of engineering. If you do mechanical, if you do electrical, Ace, you kind of stick with the technical, the technology. So he probably took a lot of service courses and stuff were geared towards that. Because in manufacturing, you have to talk to the electrical people, you have to take those courses. The thermal people, you have to take those, mechanical engineering, dynamics, statics. So you touch every aspect to be able to speak the language. And speaking multiple languages in the technology field is pretty big. So from a job perspective, to get a job after college is probably a really good choice there. Probably is. Yes, sir. Right ahead.
I started off at Sikorsky as a design engineer initially, then I was cross-trained for manufacturing engineering. And the one thing that I would point out is a major difference. Just like Anthony was saying, you learn a lot of concept in design. You learned a lot of clean sheet of paper or theory-based ideas, where in manufacturing engineering, it's more how this thing gets put together. While studying at Purdue, a lot of my courses, engineering courses, had labs as well as class. So sometimes this was a 5 or 6 credit class we're taking, but 3 credits were lab and 3 credits were actually coursework in the various study halls. The lab work that we did at Purdue really reminds me of my job at Sikorsky as a manufacturing engineer, whereas the class work reminds me of more the design engineering stuff that I do at Sikorsky. Now, again, big difference between the two. The drawing may have 60, 70, 80 parts to build an amplifier. The manufacturing engineer will go into that drawing and tell you which part to start building first, what goes on top of that part, what goes on top of that part. And they also work with industrial engineers in order to make sure the parts arrive on time and that we're getting them from the right suppliers and stuff like that. So, manufacturing engineer, again, I commend it. It's very important. A lot of folks kind of get into design, the whole clean sheet of paper type of stuff, and a lot of designs, quite frankly, don't get built. Can't get built. So, please.
How would you explain how you cultivate your creativity towards the mechanical parts? How that process happens?
The more like the manufacturing engineer, or the more like the mechanical side of engineering.
I'm thinking how you arrived at new ideas and how your education helped with that process.
That's a great question. I started off. One great example, and of course I've been at Sikorsky 8 years. Believe Sikorsky through and through now, I like to say. Our founder, Igor Sikorsky, initially started off in creating airplanes that landed into the water when he first came to the United States. Amphibious aircraft, we call them. Primarily he did this because there weren't a lot of paved roads and paved runways and stuff for airspace. Also, there were a lot of South American flights that you can easily land right into a river, right into the ocean. That business then went away because paved roads started becoming more popular. And also the airline business and fixed wing was a market that was huge, and he was a small fish in it. He then innovated vertical flight in order to primarily save lives and stuff, using some of the same technology that we actually use in fixed wing flight. I've actually explained to some of the students actually at Sikorsky, some of the ESUMS students, exactly the difference between vertical takeoff and fixed wing takeoff, and it's actually the same science in terms of lift, the same principle. So I use that example to show that sometimes the market will force you to be innovative and actually create something different. Other examples, when we first created the helicopter and the four-blade design that we have, we realized that we create lift off of the leading edge blade, and one of the blades is kind of trailing that, and it's kind of dragging the aircraft down. We have a new technology now where we kind of stack two rotor systems on top of each other and spin them in opposite directions, and it cancels that lag. So we're able to fly twice as fast as we were before. We came out with this technology and this rotor head early 70s, late 60s. We built one or two aircraft, and nobody could fly them because they would shake too much. 30 years later, 35 years later, we built a demonstrator that actually broke the speed record, and it has level 1 handling qualities, which is unheard of for a helicopter, and only Sikorsky helicopters have those right now. So we kind of hit her on Easter egg. We designed the technology, we knew the limitations of it, and we had to wait for the technology to mature a little bit more in terms of vibration and transmission build in order to actually create the helicopter now that's breaking the speed that we set initially.
Hey, you got that.
There's a lot of talk about organizational culture and finding the right culture fit when you're looking for a job or when you're hiring. I wondered if you would talk about the culture at Sikorsky and whether that's been a big part of your work life.
I'll start it off. I got the feeling he's really going to be the one to take this one home. When I started off working, first I mentioned I was bagging groceries and washing limousines, and then finally moved up to Target where I was folding clothes in an air-conditioned environment. So it was a great step up. While in college, I worked at part-time at Express, a clothing store, as well as a DSW type of shoe store. And while in college, I started interning at Hamilton Sunstrand, which is Sikorsky's brother, sister, under our big umbrella, United Technologies. While at Hamilton Sunstrand, the culture there is identical to the culture here at Sikorsky in terms of the rich legacy of innovation, highly skilled manufacturing, and highly skilled engineering design. Also, some of the cultural things such as flex time for coming to work, some of the cubicles that you work in. It's almost cookie cutter spitting image from Rockford, Illinois, to here in Stratford, Connecticut. I've been at Sikorsky about 8 years and UTC for about 10 years, and I guess I would call this my first professional work experience outside of bagging groceries and folding clothes. So it's kind of hard for me to compare other organizations and other companies to ours. I can compare maybe factory layouts and stuff like that since I've been around to different manufacturing facilities or even some customer base, Army bases and stuff like that, but it's hard to really compare for me, Sikorsky aircraft culture versus maybe other companies. But I think Anthony's worked at a couple of places.
Yeah. So I came from, so when I was in school, in undergrad, I started working, well, I did like it's not really a co-op, I did like a part-time position at an Air Force base, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is in Dayton, Ohio. So I was a lab tech there, so I got very into the materials world. So I got like an internship that summer, and then I worked part-time throughout the school year. So that's all government-based. Then I did a few internships at NASA. So my whole mindset now is government, engineering, research-driven. So now I want to go read books. I want to get deep into theory. I don't want to do too much hands-on stuff. I want to write everything. I need a calculator everywhere I go because that's the culture when you get into government. And then I was there for like 2 years after college, and I probably had maybe 2 projects because they're so prolonged that you can go so deep into all of them. So I decided to, after I finished my master's program, decided to try industry. I got a lot of my friends, they work at Boeing and those industry places, and they say it's much different than government. I said, you don't even know that because you haven't even worked in government. So I decided to try industry. I came to Sikorsky, environment's totally different, not the same at all. In government, you're a little bit more chilled out. So I can read all day and everybody in the office is fine with that. If I go to Sikorsky and I read all day, I'm not working there the next day. So that's not happening. So in Sikorsky, there's a little bit more fire up under you because now you have a guy, Igor Sikorsky, who started this business, and now you have your market holders and shareholders, and now you have people that's driving profit. You want to drive profit, you want to be in flight. The government, they're a little bit more chilled out because they have all the money that...
They are the profit.
Yeah, I'm not even going to touch that government subject, okay? So in the industry, you have, a little bit more fire to get things done. You have a little bit more productivity. Everything has a point. I can create my own point when I was at NASA or at the Air Force, and as long as I justified it, as long as it sounded like a good argument, I was good to go, got funding for it, and it was okay. Here, if it doesn't have a point, they don't want me to do it. So I've been told no a lot within this past year I've been at Sikorsky. So the environment it's pretty good. That's the big difference between the two for me. So, no problem. Is that it? Yes, sir. Well, I'm materials and processing, so I'm a materials engineer. So I started off in failure analysis. It's not really a particular part. I touch every aspect, Black Hawk, S92, Seahawk, whatever you want. If something breaks on it, then they put it on my desk and they say, why did it break? Figure out why it broke. We don't need you to go so in depth and go into all this material sciencey type stuff. Get to the point, send it out, and then that's it. So like I have wings that broke in Afghanistan that they don't know why it broke, and now I have this big 22-foot long wing in the lab down there. It won't fit on my desk, but it's like in the lab downstairs. So not anything in particular. So I touch every aspect of everything that's going on. Sorry. Yes.
That's the blade.
Yes. Yes. You guys listen to this thing.
Well, yeah, the blade, yes. We definitely do ballistic testing on the blade, and we have a lot of Kevlar in certain areas of the aircraft, primarily where the pilot flies at, and in some areas of the cabin, depending on the model of the aircraft, that protect it for ballistics. To answer his question as well, I work on avionics for Black Hawk. Avionics is aircraft computers and wiring. I started off as a wire harness designer, where I would design all the wire harnesses that went into the aircraft. Wire harnesses are bundles of wire, maybe 30, 40, 50 wires. Some of these bundles could be 70, 80 pounds. Some of them are just a couple of wires with 2 connectors on them. Now, I do this primarily for Black Hawk aircraft, and with wiring, I've also kind of been cross-trained to do avionic installations. So when we make black boxes or buy black boxes, I actually make the drawings to either procure the box or actually install the box. So I own about maybe 300 drawings at Sikorsky for aircraft build. We probably use about 2,500 drawings overall to actually build one aircraft, maybe up to about 5,000 depending on the aircraft. So I became the subject matter expert in Black Hawk wiring, which kind of spilled over into doing similar work that DeAnthony does, kind of cross-platform, multi-aircraft type of work with writing specs and installation procedures that affect every aircraft. So I actually got a chance to work with DeAnthony recently. A connector failed, and this is didn't fall. It fell in the field. It fell in our production facility, and I had to have him dissect the thing in 3 different spots and do a 10-time magnification and show all the fibers inside of it. And he had to do it quickly too, for cheap too. So I think the gentleman back here had a question.
I'd like to know how your elementary, middle school, high school mindset or focus brought to this point. Were you driven by your teachers, or did you have that kind of mindset to be a professional that you are?
That's a great question. Starting off with being a product of a single mom who had a college education, and a father who kind of got into the negative path, I worked at a factory and then kind of got caught up into drugs and things of that nature. But cleaned himself up over time and became a great upstanding citizen today. So long story short, my mother raised me, and she really, like I mentioned before, I didn't have a choice about going to college. It was, which one are you going to? And actually, I was accepted to some local schools in Michigan, like University of Michigan and Michigan State, but she put the kibosh on those because they were too close. And I was very social growing up. One thing that I learned in high school, and my high school, again, I started there at the 6th grade and went there into the 12th grade. One of their mottos, it wasn't imagine, investigate, invent. It was, it takes a whole village to raise a child. And they were trying to create a utopia there. Now, this was kind of a private parochial school, but again, no uniforms. So it felt a little more public than what your normal private school would be in Detroit. As growing up, I had a principal by the name of David Siefker, and I'll never forget this man to this day. And he walked around and he told us to call him Dad at school. Now today, in today's settings, if you call a teacher Mom or Dad, you may be in court somewhere 6 months later. Whereas Dave Siefker used to cut my hair every other week. He was a man's man, a principal's principal. So I looked up to him and other teachers and the other male teachers in the school kind of as a father figure. My first job was cleaning limos, and that was actually for one of the teachers who at, in the evenings had a chauffeur's license, and he would drive at a limo company. So he had a half dozen of the students come and clean limos, just to kind of, get us some good employment and start our work history off for us. As growing up, again, my grandmother on my mom's side was a school teacher, so college was no option. I got to keep stressing that when I was growing up. And on my father's side, it was all manufacturing, whereas my grandmother on my father's side was actually the first black nurse in Detroit. So I wouldn't say I came from great stock, because my father slipped and bumped his head as well. But yeah, definitely my parents, surrounded by the teachers, surrounded by the parents of my friends, all kind of inputted, made a strong, I guess, input into my life and to where I am today. That's another reason I always echo the point of giving back to the community, because the people who gave to me didn't have to. They weren't paid to. They weren't teachers, or they weren't police officers or folks that were paid in the community to be leaders. These were parents just like the folks sitting here right next to you guys, And sometimes you'll learn a lot from your best friend's father or your best friend's mom than you may learn from home. So again, I say it takes a village to raise a child.
I don't think I was that interested in too much stuff in elementary school. I mean, I don't think, my mom always put me in an environment where school, doing your homework, very normal. My dad was he tried to force the math down my throat a little bit, but of course I have this kind of the same story as Ace. I'm not going to go through all that. But my mom wasn't that into school, but she just said, hey, do your work, do good. And that's just what I knew growing up, all in elementary school. Middle school, I went to public middle school and probably got in a lot of trouble there. That's when I ended up going to a charter school in high school. High school got a little bit more serious. We had uniforms. If you did anything bad, you kind of got kicked out. If you got kicked out, your mom got very mad at you. So I was a little bit more better behaved in high school. So it wasn't until probably maybe my sophomore year, maybe even junior year, where I really even got into, okay, what am I about to start doing? So I didn't have this long history of my dad was an engineer, his dad was an engineer. It's my mom kind of put me in the right environments and just did the same thing over and over and over again until I got to a point where I can make my own decision. So probably junior year, I would say, okay, I'll go to college. I didn't even really think about college too much. Then once I got to that point, now I'm like, okay, I'm in college. I'll do engineering. Maybe junior year in college, I was like, okay, maybe I'll get a job. Now I have a job, now I'm like, okay, maybe I'll keep the job. So it's very incremental steps. So I wasn't that sciencey geared towards mathematical kid growing up. It kind of went step by step by step, very slow. So if your kids are not that interested in middle school or not that interested in elementary school, it's definitely not the end of the world. Definitely not. Just keep the environment.
Let me add one more thing to that. What made me become an engineer? When I was a junior in high school, in between my junior and senior year, they had a program called AIM. It was at Kettering University. Kettering University is in Flint, Michigan, probably the armpit of Michigan in terms of social economic status. But they had a very small campus that General Motors actually started 30, 40 years ago that eventually became Kettering. At this 6-week summer program I enrolled in, once a week we would go tour a different factory or a different manufacturing facility for automotive. Started off at Visteon, where they made plastic and motor injection stuff. You may be familiar with this in your back window of your car, where your speakers kind of sit at, that whole big molded piece Visteon likely made. Or even some of the dashboard equipment. We finally toured a big engine plant in Romeo, Michigan, where they built the big V8 engines for Navigators, Lincoln Town cars, and Ford Mustangs. I remember this, and this was 15 years ago virtually. They actually built a hand-built engine there. The hand-built Cobra is actually built out of Romeo, Michigan. There's 2 guys that come in and build that engine and sign their name to it every time. Well, while at that facility, we were taking a tour around the whole plant. Big, huge, dark, grungy, scary-looking place. At the very end of the assembly line where the engines roll off, they're all hooked to a chain that's connected to like a conveyor belt around the ceiling. And there's a guy with a big bazooka type of device that's also connected to the ceiling with wires and pipes. That he would walk up to the engine, squeeze the trigger, and it would start the engine to the point where it would even almost jump out of his hands. I mean, he was so used to doing this. When I first saw him start the first one up, my eyes got so big, and everything around me went into almost slow motion. It was almost like an out-of-body experience, I would say. You know, I know it's kind of cliche to say that, but to the point where I remember standing there for a little bit too long, and the chaperone had to come grab me by the arm and pull me along with the rest of the group. And from then on, I knew I kind of wanted to be an engineer. Prior to that, I was always good at math, not so good at science. But doing that sparked my engineering, I guess, interest. So I recommend also, the same way we, when the students get of age, sophomores and juniors, we bring them out to Sikorsky and show them the big bazooka type of thing that makes the aircraft fly.
At this point, we're getting a little light, and I know some parents, you might need to still head out to the West Haven meeting. So again, can we see another round of applause for our students? Thank you all for coming. Again, please look at the art. We're not kicking you out. Band, really quickly. Again, your chair, your stand. No playing tomorrow.